Welcome to the Dr. Berkson's Best Health Radio Show. Today, the focus of Best Health is on your eyes. You know, our eyes are assaulted by so many things all day long, between blue light, light from computers, light from the sun. So who we have on the show today is a neuro-ophthalmologist, Dr. Ronnie Bannock. We've had her on the show once before because she's so phenomenal. Neuro-ophthalmologist means she's had training in neurology and training in ophthalmology. So she's two specialties in one. They're the agile thinkers of eye medicine. There's only 400 to 500. I don't even think there's 500 neuro-ophthalmologists in the United States. And not all of them are shining bright lights. I got so excited to learn about them. I went to a few right in the beginning, and some were great and some were not so great. And Dr. Ronnie is one of the greatest. So let me tell you a little bit about her, and she's going to explain blue light, various lights. We're also going to go into macular degeneration. She's on the fourth rewrite. We were talking how writing is rewriting of her newest book, not yet out, on macular degeneration. And then if we have some time, we're going to go over that Medicare reimbursed product that she said last time on the show was such a win-win, that Lumega Z, and a little bit in the optic nerve. So it's an eye, and light show. So Dr. Ronnie is very interesting because she practices on the East Coast, but she's also been a principal investigator on a number of very important studies out of Mount Sinai. So she's got 1 foot in functional medicine and 1 foot in really solid science. Not that functional medicine is separate from that, but she marries both of them together, intertwines them. And she does all of this with an emphasis on nutrition and, of course, the eyes. When so many ophthalmologists and optometrists practice fabulous eye medicine, but in their conversations with the patient, they tend to leave out what can you eat that's good for your eyes? What do you eat that's not good for your eyes so you can avoid it? And most of us don't think about our eyes till we start to lose our eyesight. So what can we do with mindfulness early on in our life? So welcome to the show, Dr. Ronnie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berkson, for that kind welcome. Thank you.
So
it's a pleasure to be back.
I am so excited that you reached out because you have so much new information about how to protect our eyes from the various sources of light that comes in. So do you want to explain how you got into this and what you think are the positives and the negatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a very hot topic now because most of us are on our screens all day long, both adults and children, and especially during the pandemic when people are working from home, teleeducation, et cetera. So people get concerned about, all this, as you mentioned, we are being bombarded by various wavelengths of light, and how can we protect our eyes against these wavelengths? So let me just give a little bit of kind of scientific background about different wavelengths of light, and then we can talk more specifically about blue light. So light is a spectrum, and on one end you have short wavelengths, which are UV wavelengths that come from the sun, and then you have the visible spectrum, which is between 400 to about 750 or so nanometers. This is basically the colors of the rainbow that we can see. And then the longer end of the spectrum, we have infrared light. And so the shorter wavelengths, the UV light that comes from the sun, there's UVA, B, and C. A lot of that gets filtered out by our atmosphere. So hopefully it doesn't reach our eyes and potentially do harm. But UVA rays in particular can actually reach the eye and even reach the retina in the back of the eye. So the general recommendation is to protect against potential UV damage because it can cause not only cataracts and macular degeneration, there's also a link with too much UV exposure and different kinds of cancers on the eye or in the eye. So we absolutely need to protect against UV light. And I would suggest wearing sunglasses that have 100% UVA and UVB protection. The other thing you can look for is...
How do you know about that? So I get my sunglasses at Costco because I like to have lots of glasses, and they have great ones that are inexpensive and they do a good job. So I say get me UV protection, but I didn't know that I had to ask for against UVA and UVB. Do you have to request that? Otherwise, do you only get one?
That's a great question. Usually there's a sticker on the lens. But if you're getting it from an optician, if you just request it, I say, I want 100% UVA, UVB. The other thing you can request is UV 400. And basically what UV 400 means is that it blocks out any wavelength shorter than 400 nanometers, which is basically the whole UV spectrum. So just tell your optometrist, or, I love that you said you get your glasses from Costco, because a lot of people think that they have to buy expensive glasses for them to really do the job, but not necessarily. A $10 pair of glasses is just as good as a $100 pair of glasses, as long as it has that 100% UV protection. So just talk to your optician or optometrist about that.
So since just one other thought, this is such great information. You just gave it to us in a few minutes. You Vulcan mind melded it to us. Why is this not a conversation most of the time with the eye specialists we go to?
It's really unfortunate. And my thought is, as ophthalmologists, we're given the basic training on all of this, but a lot of what I recommend to my patients, a lot of what I do myself in my own life, I've researched on my own. I've learned this on my own. So for example, this difference between, UVA, UVB, 100% protection, UV 400. I was never taught that in my training, which is really mind-boggling to think that such a simple
eye-boggling.
Eye-boggling. Such a simple thing is not routinely taught. So I'm just trying to raise awareness, and also I try to really educate some of my peers about this, because again, this is information that we all should know as providers, but also basically spread to all of our patients and their families about just basic eye health.
Okay, so we can, no matter where we go, we can request 100% UV protection, and we should ask for it against A and B, and it should be under 400. We're protecting against the rays that are under the spectrum of 400.
Correct.
You don't even have to know what that 400 stands for. Yeah. Just say, I want to have my eyes protected against the sun.
Yes. And also a lot of people ask me, when should I wear them? Just on sunny days? I actually wear them even on cloudy days, because even through the clouds, some of those UV rays do get through. So I'm super paranoid about this, and I'm very cautious. So I even wear my sunglasses. And make sure when you get sunglasses, get large frames so they do protect as much as possible your eyes and the delicate skin around your eye socket as well.
Okay, that's really good to know. So how about the screen light? What are we exposed to when we sit in front of the computer, and how do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, so our screens, any kind of screen, whether it's your computer, your tablet, your phone, even a television, emits a certain range of wavelengths of light, particularly blue light. And blue light is on the shorter end of the spectrum. If you think about the rainbow, it goes violet, indigo, blue. It's on the shorter end of the spectrum. And these rays do get to the back of our eye. And because they are short wavelength, they have high energy, and they could potentially do damage to our retina. And that's really the biggest concern, is that these rays can go, and basically it's called photo-oxidative stress. Many people have probably heard of
Okay, so let's say that one more time. Photo-oxidative stress, meaning that it's light oxidative stress to the eyes. Right?
Yes, light energy, which can cause oxidative damage. So these rays do get to the back of the eye. Now, in terms of whether all this blue light, as you mentioned earlier, blue light comes from the sun. That's actually the highest emitter of blue light that we're exposed to, and that's healthy blue light. We do need blue light. We need blue light to maintain our circadian rhythms, to help with our sleep-wake cycle, to help with our mood. And so there are many health benefits of blue light, but the blue light that comes from the sun basically depends on when the sun rises and the sun sets, and it peaks at about 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. is when the blue light from the sun peaks. And then as the day goes on, the amount of blue light coming from the sun decreases and eventually plateaus out. So that's telling our bodies that, okay, it's time to be active and awake during a certain time of the day. And then towards the end of the day, it's time to wind down and get ready for bed. But when we are exposed to blue light from all of these artificial sources, our screens, plus a lot of people don't realize that the bulbs in our houses are energy efficient bulbs. For example, LED bulbs, CFL lights, compact fluorescent lights, also emit blue light. And these rays, especially when we're exposed to them at high levels later on in the day, can disrupt our sleep-wake cycle. It can make it harder to fall asleep and to stay asleep. And sometimes it's actually, there's been a study that has shown that too much blue light exposure, especially in young children, can actually be associated with ADD. So there are potentially behavioral aspects of this as well that we're just beginning to understand. So,
can I ask you one question?
Yeah,
so is the melatonin, is it somewhat the mediator of the effects of blue light? Because melatonin is the hormone that has a lot to do with sleep. It's not the only thing that it does. It wears many hats. But does blue light affect in particular the pineal gland and its secretion of melatonin?
Yeah, wonderful question. So I'll get a little bit into the science of this. So there are cells in our retina called melanopsin cells. And these are light sensing cells, and they are tuned into those blue wavelengths. So between 400 to 500 nanometers. And the melanopsin cells directly connect with the pineal gland. And they basically send that signal from our eyes to our brain, telling us, okay, it's time to wake up, time to go to sleep. And melatonin, which is the hormone, is the sleep hormone. And so when we have decreased stimulation of these melanopsin cells, it basically tells our pituitary gland, okay, it's time to release, it tells our bodies it's time to release melatonin, and that helps us go to bed. Or helps us fall asleep, I should say. So that is kind of the cycle that is the natural cycle. But again, when we disrupt that with a lot of blue light exposure, especially later on in the day, it can have potentially negative health effects.
So what kind of negative health effects does it when we stay up at night and we're watching that final episode of Netflix on the phone, and we just say, I just got to watch this. I got to watch this. I got to take a look at my phone. I got to see what's going on Facebook. What is that doing to our eyes late at night and to these melanopsin cells?
Yeah, so the concern is whether it's causing any damage. And what I'll just say is an overall guiding principle is there is no evidence that it causes permanent damage. There is no risk for blindness if you're looking at blue light all day long, particularly in the evening. So hopefully, I mean, that reassures many people, because there was a study, and I think we may have talked about this prior in our last podcast, but there was a study that came out in 2018 where investigators basically put some cells in a petri dish. They exposed them to high levels of blue light, and they saw that those cells died. And then the media took hold of this, and there was basically, an alarmist headline saying the blue light coming from our screens is going to kill our retinas. It's going to make us all go blind. But that is not true. And I'll explain why that's not true. So the investigators, the cells that they took and put in the petri dish were not even eye cells. They were not retinal cells. They were cervical cancer cells that they put in the petri dish. And the reason why they use these cervical cancer cells is because these cells grow very well in a petri dish. So these are the typical cells that are used in research. So they put them in the petri dish, and then they expose them to the blue light. And these cells don't have the protective mechanisms that our retinal cells have. So yes, we do need blue light to stimulate our melanopsin cells, but there are also protective mechanisms within our retina that help absorb some of the blue light to prevent permanent damage. And these are pigments that we have in our eyes, naturally that we have in our eyes, that are called the macular carotenoids. So we've heard of carotenoids, beta carotene, for example, from carrots, but these are specific pigments that nature put in our retinas to help protect against blue light. And they are lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin. It's a mouthful, I know, but I call them vitamins L, M, and Z for short. So that's how we can best protect against blue light. And again, there's no risk for blindness, but there can be sleep issues. There can be potential behavioral issues. And then also there is this condition called digital eye strain. And many people may suffer this, especially if they're on screens a lot of the day, which many of us are. And digital eye strain is basically an umbrella term. It's a constellation of symptoms. It includes blurry vision, trouble focusing, dry eye, headaches, light sensitivity, sometimes even neck and back pain. So that's all digital eye strain. And so some studies have shown that if you boost the pigment in your retina of these macular carotenoids, that you can reduce the symptoms of digital eye strain. So really important. We're talking about nutrition. So I just wanted to put that in there, a little plug for nutrition. Eat lots of foods that have these pigments to protect against the blue light. That's my biggest kind of piece of advice for people who are concerned about it.
So you said a lot of things that were just extraordinary. So one of the first things is be very careful about scary headlines. They sell news, they get into the public consciousness. They're very hard to get out of the public consciousness. We've seen this with the Women's Health Initiative and the adverse effects of the statistical fiasco of the hormone studies. Recently, just a few days ago, we saw this with essential fatty acids from fish oil, which I am going to do a show on, where they said the more you take fish oil, the more you risk of AFib. But if you dive into it, and I've just been going back and forth with Dr. Houston, the cardiologist, so much of those studies was wrong. So understand when you hear scary headlines, especially something as big as this, you sit in front of your computer screen, your eyeball cells are going to die. You want to listen to experts that understand how to dive into how the methodology was done. For example, the methods, the cells they used weren't even really reflective of your own eye cells that have Mother Nature's inborn protective mechanisms. So please embrace this. And once scary headlines get out there, people have it and they think, well, I think I heard this. I'm not going to go with it. And then they're always uptight about sitting in front of the computer when they could be poetically creating a new book or something. So that's a big point. So thank you for sharing that. And the other is, isn't Mother Nature amazing that you actually have pigments, kind of like a painter paints with pigments? The old painters had incredible oil pigments. Nature paints your eye protection with pigments. So can you go more? I take every day a product called MacuHealth. And I've actually seen miracles with some of my patients with it, but it's got the lutein, xanthian, mesoxanthian. Can you go into these pigments, how people can get them, and what's the difference between products like MacuHealth and then the Medicare reimbursed one, Lumega Z?
Yeah, absolutely. So these pigments, I had mentioned the best way to get them is through foods. And the foods that have these pigments, or highest levels of these pigments, are the green leafy vegetables. So you may have heard your ophthalmologist say, eat lots of leafy greens. And that's the reason why. So spinach, kale, collard greens.
I've never heard my eye doctor say that. Sorry.
Really? Oh my
No.
goodness. Okay. Well, I will say that as an eye doctor, that is the number one thing you can do to protect your retinas. But other foods have these pigments too. For example, egg yolk. Now, I know that eggs have been controversial in the past, but that beautiful orange color of egg yolk comes from the lutein and zeaxanthin in the egg yolk, and it's protective. Also, orange peppers, yellow peppers, corn, all these have, you can think of this group of foods as brightly colored vegetables and fruits. And the more orangish yellow pigments are what are absorbed by our retinas and protect our eyes. Now, I'll just mention this in terms of a guideline or thumbnail. So it's recommended that people have, in terms of lutein, 6.5 milligrams a day in their diet. And most people, especially those on a Western diet, probably only get 1 to 2 milligrams a day of lutein. Zeaxanthin is recommended 1 to 2 milligrams, and most of us probably get less than 1 milligram. So because our diets, unfortunately, are so deficient in these nutrients. Now, there are other populations in the world that have very, very high levels of these naturally in their diet, but it's very hard for us to get these pigments in our diet. I recommend, and many doctors also recommend, ophthalmologists also recommend having a supplement with these pigments. Again, lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin. And
you mentioned the foods that have mesozeaxanthin.
That's what I was going to mention.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it's very hard to get meso from foods. And the reason is because it's only found in certain marine species. For example, trout, certain species of trout, sometimes shrimp, krill. It's very, very hard to get that. And actually, it's believed that the majority of mesozeaxanthin comes from lutein. So when we ingest lutein, the body transforms it into mesozeaxanthin. And of all the three pigments, the meso is the most important because it's right at the center of the retina. And that's where our central vision comes from. The 20/20 vision that most of us aspire to and hopefully have comes from protection by mesozeaxanthin. So how are you going to get these pigments if you can't get enough of them from
Does
foods?
It come from marigold petals? Somebody told me.
So the supplements come from marigolds. Yes, that beautiful orange saffron color is from these pigments. And so if you're looking for an eye health supplement, whether it's MacuHealth or Lumega Z, look for an ingredient called Lutamax 2020 that has all three of these pigments already in it and in the right ratio. So many supplements on the market have Lutamax 2020. And the other thing is the formulation, it is lipid soluble. So in order to really enhance your absorption of this supplement or these specific pigments, make sure that you do have it with some fat, some healthy fat. And I'll just, you had mentioned before about Lumega Z. So I don't know if you can see this here. This is Lumega Z. It is a liquid, and it's supposed to, once you open, it's supposed to be refrigerated. The reason I love Lumega Z is because, and unfortunately I don't have the ingredients on the back here, but it has that formulation. It's actually a proprietary formulation of Lutamax 2020. It also has in it astaxanthin. Now, astaxanthin is another very powerful carotenoid, very powerful antioxidant, and it is basically is considered the super antioxidant of all antioxidants. And it's been shown in at least one major study to help decrease the risk for macular degeneration and vision loss. So Lumega-Z has, again, the 3 macular carotenoids plus astaxanthin, plus basically the reason I like this so much, and I do take it myself and my family, we all take it, is because it basically has every other vitamin that you would normally have in your multivitamin. So it takes the place of a regular multivitamin. So instead of taking like multiple different supplements, you can cover your bases with a single one. It also has some other important antioxidants. For example, it has glutathione, it has alpha lipoic acid, it has N-acetylcysteine, and all of these are important for eye health.
Now, who makes this? And you said it was covered by Medicare. If your ophthalmologist orders it, is that accurate?
So I'm not exactly sure about the Medicare reimbursement. What I'll tell you is that this Lumega-Z, you can't just buy it online. You can't just go to Amazon and purchase it or go to your local health food store. This is considered a medical food. And the reason it has this designation is because of the macular carotenoids, the lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin. And this is a special category that the FDA has, meaning that it has to be given to you under the supervision of a doctor, a healthcare provider. It doesn't necessarily have to be an ophthalmologist or a medical doctor, but a healthcare provider. It could be your naturopath, it could be your chiropractor, it could be your nurse practitioner, but your provider needs to give you a code, which is called a DAC code. I believe it's called Doctor Authorization Code, even though, again, it doesn't necessarily have to be your doctor, and then you can purchase it online. So if you're interested in this, ask your local doctor, whether you could even be your primary care doctor, ask your doctor for a DAC code, and then you can order it. Now, the company is trying to loosen its availability to enable people to purchase this. So it could be that in the future, and I've spoken with the company, it's called Guardian Health, is the company. They may actually just say, okay, it's okay if you have a doctor's name who recommended it to you, may not necessarily need that code. So in the future, I'll have to confirm this with you, Dr. Berkson. But if you just say Dr. Bannock, I heard her on a podcast and she recommended it for my eye health, you may be able to order it without that DAC code.
Okay, I'm going to have my staff really look into this. I have a section on my website called Products We Love, and there's some products that people can't get from online, for example, Megaspore. So I have a link where they can purchase it, and then a link for FullScript where they can get a lot of different doctors' products. So I think I'm going to talk with you sometime this week if we can and see if we can work something out to get access to people, because eye health is so important. So how much of this would you take? If it's a liquid, how do you take it?
Oh, basically, it's 1.5 tablespoons, and you can take it straight, or it's a little bit thick, and it's this beautiful orange color. I wish I could show you, but I don't want to spill it.
And because of the petals, the
petals, the marigolds, right. Yes. Or you can mix it with any drink. So you can mix it with a little bit of juice, a little bit of water, or again, just take it straight. But basically 1.5 tablespoons a day.
What does it taste like? What does it taste like?
It's a little bit thick. It's not chalky. It's just a little bit thick, and it doesn't have that much of a flavor. Maybe it's got a little bit of a hint of citrus in it, but that's about it. It's okay. Not. It doesn't have a strong taste.
Okay, that's good to know. So you take it with your largest meal. Yes. And this is something that you can start at any age, any time. And what it's giving you are, in the perfect ratio, it's giving you the pigments that help protect your eye from light damage. And then it's also giving you many of the backup oxidative nutrients that work synergistically. I don't know what the dosages are, because dosages for alpha lipoic acid and N-acetylcysteine, those all add up, but it's very nice. I can't wait to take a deep dive into that label and see what it offers. But,
Absolutely. And one other thing I'll say is a lot of people, when they think of an eye health supplement, they go to their local drugstore, they see the AREDS supplements, the AREDS supplements, which are the ones that were studied for macular degeneration. So for example, Bausch & Lomb makes one. It's called Preservision. This is called Preservision AREDS 2 supplement. And so the Lumega-Z, they actually did a head-to-head trial of the common ARED supplement, the one that's readily available in most drugstores, versus Lumega Z. And they found that the Lumega Z actually increased the pigment in the retina significantly more than the regular ARED supplement. And they believe it has to do with the fact that it's a liquid, that it's more bioavailable, that it's more lipid soluble than taking the capsule or a tablet type of supplement.
Boy,
really interesting.
That is very interesting. So, because vitamin D is lipid soluble, if people have a larger body mass index, they have to take more vitamin D because a lot of it stays stored in their fat cells. Do you have to take a lot more of these pigments if you are heavier in weight to get the same protective action on your eyes, or do you?
That is a wonderful question, and I wish I had the answer to that.
All these things matter, it's so interesting. They do matter,
absolutely. For example, now a lot of children are perhaps taking like a Lutamax 2020 supplement that they call them like the blue light gummy supplements for children. And the question
Where do they get those? Where do they get those?
There are actually a couple of companies that make the gummy supplements for children. The one I like is Twin Lab, and my daughter loves them because it tastes like little gummies, little candies. But they are. It's interesting that the children's formulation is less than the adult formulation. It's about half of the adult formulation. So, for example, the lutein content for children is 10 milligrams, but for adults it's 20 milligrams.
Oh, interesting. So, you have to understand, you're wanting to get a protective layer of these pigments. The size matters. In essence, how thick that protective layer is inside your eyes protects your eyes as you move through your life. And, eyesight is one of those things you don't think about it till that someone puts the fear of God into you that you're losing it. And there is nothing so scary as someone telling you that you are on the track to losing your eyesight. Much of this, I'd like you to talk about what you see in reversibility, because when you speak to a lot of ophthalmologists and you end up getting glaucoma and you lose some of your visual acuity, there's a test you take looking at little white dots of light, and then they say you can see so much and not. And they say, many say that you've lost this much vision. We can protect you from here on in, but whatever you've lost, you can't regain. And I have found that not to be true at all, that you can improve even visual acuity tests. But I'd like you to talk about what you've seen with patients who were on a downward decline of losing their vision, how these interventions, lifestyle and nutraceutical, can reverse what you've seen happen.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That story you shared, that you were told something, but you've taken the initiative to do things proactively, because that really is so important. And yes, there are certain eye conditions which we say we can't really fix. But what I found, particularly with macular degeneration and in some glaucoma patients as well, is that with the proper nutrients and the proper protective interventions, the choices that we make in our nutrition and our lifestyle, that yes, some conditions can be reversed. For example, in macular degeneration, what happens is underneath the retina in the back of the eye, people develop waste products. And these waste products are not cleared effectively. And these waste products are called drusen. They look like tiny little yellowish white stones. And drusen is actually the German word for pebble. And so there are studies that have shown, and I've actually seen this in my patients as well, that with aggressive dietary changes and the proper supplementation, that we can actually get these drusen to shrink and perhaps even disappear, which is phenomenal.
Is that what they sometimes refer to as blister?
Not exactly.
Or is that really something different? Is a macular blister different?
A macular pucker, maybe you're thinking of a pucker.
Well, one of my patients just reported to me something of what his ophthalmologist said about his macular blister. So I was going to ask you that. I didn't know what they were referring to.
It's probably a pucker. Yeah, it's probably a pucker. That's more on the surface of the retina, but the drusen are underneath the retina. Okay. And again, we can try to, with an ARED supplement, for example, I'll just talk a little bit about ARED since I had mentioned this before. So the AREDS trial, there were two AREDS trials, AREDS 1 and AREDS 2, and they were sponsored by the National Institutes of Health. So, one of the largest organizations in terms of health research in the country. And what they did was they looked at 5 nutrients. They looked at vitamin A, they looked at vitamin C, E, copper, and zinc. And they gave this supplement to a little over 3,000 people, and they saw if that helped reduce their chances of macular degeneration or vision loss from macular degeneration. What they found was that the supplement only helped 25% of the people actually protect their vision. So the question is, why was it only 25%? What about the rest? What about those 75% who progressed? It's my belief that it's because it was only those 5 supplements, the 5 nutrients that were given. We need a lot more than just those 5 nutrients. We need the whole spectrum of antioxidants. We also need the B vitamins. We need vitamin D, as you mentioned. We need our omegas. So having just the AREDs is not enough. That's really my strong belief. That's what I tell my patients. You need to have the full spectrum. And again, get it from foods if possible, and then also supplementation. Then the AREDS 2, which is the second study sponsored by the NIH, that study looked at adding lutein and zeaxanthin, and they got rid of vitamin A, but they kept the vitamin C, vitamin E, copper, and zinc. And they again found it was only 25% effective. So again, you have to think about where are the missing pieces of the puzzle? What are we not getting here with these supplements? And again, think about the supplement, the formulation of the supplement. Is it a liquid? Is it a capsule? Is it a tablet? What's the bioavailability? What are you having it with? How often do you take it? And then also think about the lifestyle factor. So how else can you boost your macular pigment or protect your macular pigment? So if you want, we can talk a little bit about blue light glasses.
Yeah,
I think that's a common topic.
I want to go there in a few minutes. I just want to make some comments. It's so interesting. Not everybody absorbs whatever they put in their mouth. Some people have better digestive health than other people, and our biomes have a lot to do with it, and how much stomach acid we make and pancreatic enzymes. There's studies that show that some people got better benefit from herbal applications that had more stomach acid in their gut because they could actually break the herbs down into the beneficial constituents. So some people might need digestive aid support. Also, it could be what you eat, because how you eat affects how you can absorb supplements you take. A good example of this is high fructose corn syrup. So we don't think of this, but vitamin D needs to be activated. We've often thought of it that it's activated in the liver and the kidney, but now we know it's activated on almost every single immune cell. And it's activated by a very specific enzyme that liberates your vitamin D to protect you. But if you consume once or twice regularly throughout your day foods that have high fructose corn syrup, it deactivates the vitamin D activating enzyme. So even though you took a vitamin D supplement, kind of like the people in this RED study, who knows what they're eating that's deactivating the bioavailability. So you are a planet unto yourself, and you have waters and terrain and earth, and it all affects everything else. So when you take a handful of supplements and you put it down your mouth, it's affected by the rest of what's going on in your planetary interactions. So I
love that analogy. That is a beautiful analogy.
It's just that, I think that has something to do with it because, and then also, I don't know how much they recommend to people, but when you do take fat soluble supplements, you want to take them with your largest meal, because then you're secreting more of the digestive players that help you utilize fats. And if you've had your gallbladder removed, right, then how you absorb fats is very different than someone that still has a gallbladder. And they're certainly not looking at that in some of these studies, putting off, did you have a gallbladder removal and why did you have a gallbladder removal? Because that really affects for the rest of your life. And some people, not all, how you absorb things like these fat soluble pigments that are so eye protective.
Yeah, I just want to share a story with you of this patient I had this past week. This patient, he's in his early 80s, and he's had Crohn's disease for most of his life. And he actually, early on in his disease course, he had to have much of his bowel removed. So he definitely has a short bowel, but he's also trained as a nutritionist. So he has, gone on and really gone deep in terms of his deficiencies and how to correct for them. And he was taking, his usual supplements. And, I had suggested perhaps taking, something that he may potentially be able to better absorb and some other dietary changes. But he was very, set in his dietary pattern and his supplement regimen. And he actually just this past week developed a wet type of macular degeneration, which is quite unfortunate. And even though, as a
what does that mean for those that are listening?
So macular degeneration has two types. There's a dry type and then there's a wet type. The dry type has the drusen, which is, again, the waste deposits under the retina. And then what happens is 10% of people who have dry progress into wet. And wet is what I like to call leaky eye syndrome. And I talk about this in my book that's going to be coming out. Many people have probably heard of leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky heart. But wet macular degeneration is leaky eye syndrome. And what happens is there are new blood vessels because all of those drusen, those waste deposits accumulate, they trigger inflammation, and then ultimately they trigger new blood vessels to form that really should not be there. These blood vessels are not normal, they're not healthy, they're fragile, and they tend to leak. And they leak blood and fluid and proteins. So they basically leak underneath the retina, they raise it, they elevate the retina, they cause significant vision loss and basically central loss. So people really can't see. They can't read, they can't drive, they can't watch television, they can't see faces. It's very devastating when dry macular degeneration transforms into wet macular degeneration. And again, there are steps people can take to prevent against that. And as I was telling you,
what are those steps and why? So yeah, what happened with this gentleman that he was eating so well, but it progressed to wet in him?
And I really do. It was just to your point about, everyone's internal physiology is different. Our systems are also different. But gut health is not just keeping our microbiome healthy. It's also keeping everything else healthy and keeping inflammation at bay and supporting all of that. Yes, this individual was doing what he thought he needed to do, but he actually needed to do more. And unfortunately, he progressed to wet. So he will end up getting the traditional ophthalmologic treatments for wet macular degeneration, which is basically injections into the eye of certain medications that will.
How efficacious is that?
That is actually, it is quite efficacious. So I have to say, even though it's an invasive procedure, it is what is needed to help protect vision in individuals who progress to wet macular degeneration. But the goal is to prevent people from getting to that stage. That's really my goal. And that's, in terms of my book, I teach 7 strategies to prevent people from getting to that stage of where they've actually lost vision. So even people who have early macular degeneration, the early drier forms, can help do things to prevent it getting to that advanced stage. And gut health is a big part of it. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people, they don't necessarily make that connection between the eye and the gut, but the gut is really instrumental in so many bodily functions. And it helps to control our neurotransmitters, our levels of inflammation, molecular mimicry. I mean, there are just so many factors related to gut health that people don't realize.
If you love information like this, don't forget that I've started a membership. For example, we just did a deep dive into vitamin D and learned what other things block that activating enzyme. And we go into the relationship, just like Dr. Ronnie is talking about, between the gut and so many things, just so many levels of nuances that help you be healthier and healthier in a world that's dirtier and dirtier. So if you want to learn more about this, you can go to drlindseyberkson.com/membership. There's 3 different levels. And don't forget to take a look into that. And I'm going to see if I can also ask Dr. Ronnie, especially if her new book is looming on the horizon, if she'll come and maybe give a little talk to the highest level. Tends to be doctors and pharmacists. And I know that they would love to hear what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So blue light glasses, do they work? What are they? Where do we get them? What's the best? Yada, yada.
Here we go. I got mine right here. So blue light. We talked about, the potential negative adverse eye health effects of blue light. No significant long-term issues with eye health, but the short-term issue is digital eye strain. So there's a little controversy here, and the reason is because just last week or 2 weeks ago, there was a study that was published looking at blue blocking glasses, whether they actually relieve eye strain or not, digital eye strain. And what the investigators found was that they took about 30 or so individuals, healthy individuals, exposed them to a screen for 2 hours and had them wear blue blockers. Now, there are different shades of blue blocking tints. You can see here, this is a lighter
There's
shade.
There's a little blue blocking tint right
yes,
here.
This is a slight yellowish tint. You can get yellow, you can get orange, you can get deep. But in this study, what the investigators did was they had people wear the blue blockers and wear them for those 2 hours of screen time. And they did some tests, basically subjective tests of their digital eye strain. And what they found was that it didn't really make a difference wearing blue blockers. But again, breaking down that study, kind of dissecting out that study. First of all, most of us probably spend a lot more than just 2 hours a day on a screen. That's number one. So perhaps those individuals didn't really have symptoms yet of digital eye strain. So what was there to fix? The second thing is that the blue blockers used in this study were not a full blue blocker. So there are different strengths. So these are, for example, about 30% blue blocking. So the ones used in the study were between 20 to 30% blue blocking. And so they don't fully block out that blue light. And it's been my experience that really to get the benefits of a blue blocker, you really do need to purchase a blue blocker that's 98 to 100% blocking the blue light that's coming from your screen. And you don't necessarily need to wear these all day long, but I would certainly recommend wearing them after sunset. Because that's, again, when the blue light, typically we should not be exposed to that level of blue light. So you want to protect your eyes against that. And the other way to kind of know whether your blue blocker is truly filtering more of the blue light than just a lighter blue blocker is to put them on. And when you put them on, if you look at your screen, you should not be able to see any shade of blue. If you can still see the color blue, that means that it's not fully blocking the blue light. So when I put these red ones on, I see no blue whatsoever. And then versus when I put these on, I can still see some shades of blue. Perhaps they're less intense than they were before, but I know that these are not the full blue blockers. So I would suggest if you want to get blue blockers, perhaps wear the lighter colored ones. Again, this is for digital eye strain. Wear the lighter ones during the day if you really feel like you have digital eye strain, and then wear the darker ones after sunset. That's my typical recommendation.
Now, where did you get these?
So I think we have the same kind.
We do.
These are True Dark. And this is there are many companies out there that make blue blockers. Gunnar, for example, True Dark, Uvex, which also makes, for example, ski goggles and other types of sports goggles. But True Dark is the one I like. And I especially like these because if you look, they are wraparound and they actually have, basically, they obstruct any stray light from getting in. So when I put these on, really, I have full protection around my eyes. I'm not getting any stray light from the sides getting in. So these definitely help me. I have to admit, I do spend time on the computer at night. It's very hard for me not to be on my screen at nighttime. But when I wear these, it definitely helps me fall asleep easier. It helps me my eyes feel immediately relaxed when I put these on. So I would suggest getting these if you feel those effects later in the day.
And just so you know, I got these from Dave Asprey. And so he sells and he sends them to you in this beautiful box. And he gave them to me as a thank you for being on his show and him being on my show. And I just love these glasses. They really do. When you use them at night, I think they're one of the aspects to help you get a better sleep. There's so many different aspects. By the way, I have a free blog on many different things to check off about if you have problems with sleep at drlindseyberkson.com. I have a free blog on insomnia, and the Townsend Letter republished it. The American Holistic Academy of Medicine republished it. And the Price Pottinger organization requested that they republish it, which they did 2-3 months ago. So that paper was so well respected. All of those very respectable institutions that are trying to educate people republished it. I did not know about these glasses, so it is missing this part. I'm going to have to rewrite that. But this is something important to know. Will this also protect eyes against the diseases we're talking about, like macular degeneration and glaucoma, or this is basically about protecting you from eye strain?
So we don't have the data on that yet. There is no long-term data, but certainly if these are almost 100% blue blocking, they will prevent that photooxidative stress that I was talking about. So for me, I'm going to do whatever it takes to prevent myself from getting chronic eye diseases in the future. And I'm actually at risk for macular degeneration. So I do wear these later on in the day as an extra protective kind of shield beyond getting those pigments from nutrition and supplements. So it really depends on...
You said you're at risk of macular degeneration. What are the risk factors?
Great question. So There are genetic risk factors, and then there are epigenetic risk factors. And I talk about all of these in my book. So the genetic risk factors, there are over 50 genes identified that are linked to macular degeneration. And, I mentioned I'm at risk. It's because I've done genetic testing and I know I have one of those genes. So that is one component of it. But also other non-modifiable or genetic type risk factors include sex. So we know that women are actually more at risk for macular degeneration than men. Age is a risk factor. So the older one is, the higher the risk. For example, if one is in their 50s, their risk is only about 2%. But if one is in their 70s, the risk jumps up to 30%. And it's higher for individuals.
That's huge. 30% is high. Huge.
It is quite high. And then also pigmentation is a non-modifiable or genetic type of risk factor. So we know from many population studies that individuals who do have lighter hair pigmentation, lighter eye pigmentation, lighter skin pigmentation have a higher risk for macular degeneration. And it's probably because there's pigment in the retina. Also, there is melatonin pigment in the retina as well, or underneath the retina, to help absorb those potentially harmful rays. So the more pigment has in their body, the more pigment they have in their eyes. So that's probably the reason why. And then there are
just one question, just before you go to the epigenetics. So if we take melatonin, does some of that get laid down in the eye as a protective factor or no?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. Yes.
Just with that comment you made, that was so fascinating. Okay.
Yes, we don't know. There's a lot we still need to, learn about. We don't know that yet. So then there are the epigenetic risk factors, or the modifiable risk factors. So we know that one of the main risk factors for macular degeneration is smoking. And there's been a couple of major twin studies done where one twin, these are identical twins, one twin smoked and the other twin did not smoke. And the twin who smoked had a significantly higher, 3 times higher risk of developing macular degeneration than the twin who did not smoke. People with the identical genetics who were exposed to toxins from smoke. So not only that, there's a recent study that came out on air pollution, a study out of the UK that looked at over 50,000 people and looked at their levels of air pollution and their risk for macular degeneration. And those individuals who had higher levels of air particles in their environment, higher levels of nitrous dioxide and other toxins in their air were at higher risk for macular degeneration. So we know air pollution is a risk. Obesity, increased waist circumference, lack of exercise, these are all modifiable risk factors. And then going back to diet, individuals who have a low intake of certain fruits and vegetables, those fruits and vegetables that are high in those macular carotenoids that should be protecting us, they're at higher risk as well. So lots of modifiable risk factors. And then inflammation. So there are inflammatory markers. For example, C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker in the blood, is higher in individuals with macular degeneration, and some other markers of oxidative stress are higher as well. So it's important to think about that. Yes, there are the genetic risk factors, but there are so many things that we can have control over. The epigenetic risk factors that we can modify and be proactive about to help reduce our risk for vision loss.
So you told us about great foods to eat. Are there any specific foods to definitely avoid because they might play a role into inflammation or to macular and optic nerve damage? So what's the list of the bad no-no foods?
The bad foods. I actually just wrote a blog on this and it's on my website. The top 10 foods to avoid for macular degeneration. And they're basically foods that fall into the SAD type of diet. So the SAD diet is the standard American diet. So a diet that's high in refined carbohydrates, processed foods, unhealthy omega-6 fats. So foods, for example, and this has been actually shown in two clinical studies, that people who had foods that were high in these SAD types of foods, for example, French fries, processed cakes, cookies, pies, also other types of fried foods, margarine was also one of them. These are the types of foods we should be avoiding, and also refined sugars, for example, sugary drinks, white flour, those types of foods we should probably be avoiding to help decrease our risk for macular degeneration.
And the other thing I want to talk about too is, so we know that green leafy vegetables are very high, for example, in lutein. So kale, everyone's excited about kale. Well, the Environmental Working Group publishes once a year their Dirty Dozen. When I wrote Hormone Deception years ago, I introduced everybody to the Environmental Working Group, and they're phenomenal. You can even get an app on your phone and go to a store and take a picture of an item and then find out how many carcinogens or what's the back copy of the the good and the bad and the ugly of that product. They now put kale that's not organic as their third dirtiest food because it is so high in a variety of chemicals that do other pro-oxidative, pro-inflammatory things. So certain foods you really want to make sure that you get organic, because I know some people don't have enough money to purchase everything as organic. But if you're now starting to try new recipes with kale, especially because of how protective it is for your eyes, because it's a high lutein food. Is that correct? It's a high.
It is absolutely correct. Yes.
Then
yes.
You want to make
sure. And zeaxanthin. It actually has both of them.
There you go. It's a two pigments in one. But you want to get the organic. And my grocery store, my local grocery store here has an organic section. And it might be that it's about 50 cents more to get the organic kale than not the organic kale, but it's worth it. So just so you know that.
Yes. And actually, the Environmental Working Group, I love them as well. They just released their 2021 list. And also on that list, in addition to kale, was also mustard greens and collard greens, which are, again, leafy greens, high in lutein, high in zeaxanthin, and also bell peppers was new to their list for the Dirty Dozen. And I believe that potatoes were removed and then bell peppers were added. So I had mentioned before about the benefits of orange peppers and yellow peppers. So if you are getting those as sources of lutein and zeaxanthin, make sure that you just do your best to try to get it organic if possible.
Is there any research on the eyes with bioflavonoids? Because you were talking about the wet macular degeneration, and bioflavonoids give tone to capillaries. That's what they do. So is there any research on that?
There is, yeah. So there are some studies looking at certain bioflavonoids. So for example, quercetin, also apigenin, which is a bioflavonoid.
Oh, that's one of my favorites. Yes. Parsley and celery have that. Okay.
Yes. And then I'm blanking on what some of the other ones are, but resveratrol and rutin, yes. And so these all help to stabilize blood vessels. And especially if you have a tendency towards inflammation, gut inflammation or other types of inflammation, autoimmune disease, you want to make sure that you have these foods that are rich in these bioflavonoids. And the best way to get them is through the colorful fruits and vegetables that we all love. And I typically just tell my patients, rotate through your different colors during the week. Make sure that you're getting all the different shades of greens and reds, particularly deep shades like reds and blues and purples, to get some of those wonderful bioflavonoids. Anthocyanin, that's another one. So berries are a great source of anthocyanins. And that's been also shown.
Blue and purple and black pigments, right?
Yes, yeah. And specifically in macular degeneration to be protective.
So if you want to take a look, I put together to music a lot of the meals that I was eating during the pandemic. I call it my pandemic palette or my pandemic eats. And if you go to Dr. Lindsay Berkson on Facebook or David Key Lindsay Berkson on Facebook, and you just look right now, right at the top post there, I go through about 35 dishes that are all colorful, all different colors of the rainbow, different foods to music, so you can see all the different colors that came in. And one other comment about bioflavonoids from the Environmental Working Group. So we think of bioflavonoids as that white material on the inside or between the little segments of citrus fruit. And many of us like clementines and oranges and lemons. But what the Environmental Working Group found is that non-organic citrus fruits had very high levels of carcinogens linked to childhood cancers, way above what the FDA says is a safe level. So they're actually going on a campaign to have these chemicals removed, but they are in non-organic citrus. So we used to think, I was just staying with a friend of mine who's a scientist in Naples, and he thinks organic food is ridiculous. It's way too expensive. He doesn't understand all these nuances. It's not ridiculous. It's something to appreciate. And it's nice when a reputable company goes to the trouble of outlining for you your do's and don'ts of purchasing so that you can protect your family and get the better bang for your buck.
Yes, and health is priceless. So even if it's just a little bit, slightly more expensive, think about the long-term benefits that you reap from that.
So the one other thing I wanted to mention, because we could go on. I knew this happened the last time I had you on the show. I actually wanted to do an all-day seminar, invite you over for a pajama party. We could sit and sip on miso.
I would love to. Once the pandemic's better. Absolutely.
So we are not going to be able to get into this in depth, but one thing I wanted to mention to you. So when I lecture for A4M, sometimes I have time off, and Dr. Mark Houston, who's developed functional cardiology, was lecturing in another room, and I'd go sneak off into Dr. Mark's lectures, and he would be talking about these molecules that drive heart disease. Many of them began to be noticed by the Cleveland Heart Clinic. That's where they first came from, the Heart Clinic, because they drive heart disease. And these molecules, I refer to them now as the molecules of mass destruction, because they drive, for example, TMAO, trimethylamine monoxide, it drives heart disease and stroke much more than cholesterol. So he and his cardiac patients, being a functional cardiac doc, runs all these molecules, and each one is elevated in a different pattern in each person. And then there's ways to optimize their levels. So I've started to work with these molecules because I've done research. They highly affect the optic nerve. And it was one of the ways I improved my glaucoma history was by optimizing these molecules. I haven't done a deep dive on the macula, and they also have a lot to do with renal health. So as I've been running these molecules on kidney patients, I had a patient come in last week. He's gone from stage 3 kidney disease for the last 15 years to now normal function within 10, 11 months. He said, we were just working with these molecules because they also aggravate the kidney, and we were normalizing them. He said, I went to my ophthalmologist, who I've been going to for 30 years. My ophthalmologist said to me, oh my God, the size of your macular blister. He's the patient who used this term blister. He said, it's 50% reduced. And in my whole practice, I've never seen this happen before. I don't know if he meant a pucker, a blister. I don't know these terms from an ophthalmologist, but the ophthalmologist said to him, your eye health is improving so much. I have never seen this in practice before. What are you doing? And of course, it's addressing these molecules of mass destruction. So I'm going to want to chat with you offline about these things. And I didn't really know what that blister meant. But in other words, we know that certain molecules at the molecular level can damage or protect tissues. And you can measure these, and then they're influenced by nutrients and then the way you eat. So I'm going to propose to you that there's this whole other level whereby rather than just pigments and just improving our diet in a general way, we can each of us have our own footprint of these molecules of mass destruction, and they can be measured and then improved. And I would love to do or talk to you about a little teeny pilot trial on working with these molecules of mass destruction and macular health.
I would love to. Fascinating. Yes. Okay. Yes. No, I think the field of metabolomics in eye disease is just getting started. There's just so much we don't yet know about what's happening on as you mentioned, on a biochemical level that could potentially trigger inflammation or reduce inflammation. Right. And it's a ripe field. And I would love to collaborate with you. Absolutely.
Well, I just love your brain and your smart plus heart, which is, by the way, is the name of my new membership, drlindseyberkson.com/membership. You really are someone who I know that part of this was because you helped heal yourself originally. We went through that story with our first podcast together, but you're a brilliant thinker, and you just keep serving others and passing the information forward. I can't thank you enough for all your hard work. I know that just this show today is going to help so many people protect the eyesight for themselves and those that they love. So I hope that you and I talk soon. And thank you very much. We're recording this on a Sunday. You've given me part of your day off, and we all really appreciate that, Dr. Ronnie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berkson. It's really been a pleasure. And every time I come on your show, I learn so much from you. So I really appreciate what you do as well. And for you and your audience, it's a pleasure to be part of your community.
So, we get to have these great dialogues, and we learn from each other. So if you love these dialogues and you want them to keep going, please go to iTunes and leave a review. Apparently, you need to be a Mensa person to know how to leave a review. So at my website, drlindseyberkson.com, in the podcast section, we show at the end of each show notes exactly how to leave a review. Now, in Dr. Ronnie's show notes, I am going to put the name of that product, and I'm going to talk with her about how to write it up so that we can look about your access to that product. And I'm also going to talk about the exact amount of blue light that should be filtered out by the best glasses. So if you go to the show notes, there'll be a lot of information that will guide you to help. And I'll also give you Dr. Ronnie's links and anything that she's working with, because you want to follow her blog. She said she just wrote a really great blog on which foods to eat and not eat. So we're going to guide you to her too. So don't forget, not only listen to the show, but go check out the show notes, because there's lots of ways that it helps you take this information and run with it. So again, my dear friend, look at you. You're beautiful inside and out. What a great human being.
As are you. As are you.
Okay, well, take care, and may the force of the eyesight be with us all.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.